Hi everyone, this is Selvi. Today's topic is what is scope change and why scope change occurs. We all are aware of what is sprint backlog. In our previous episodes, we have discussed about what is sprint backlog, what is scope of a sprint. I have a request here if any one of you have not listened to that episodes, please listen to those episodes because it is going to be really helpful in this topic. Now, in this episode, we are going to talk about two important sections. One is what is scope change and why scope change occurs. First, let's get into what is scope change. First of all, what is scope? When a sprint starts, we as a team align on a sprint goal and we commit to the sprint goal. To achieve the sprint goal, there will be work items that gets pulled from product backlog and gets created in the sprint backlog. This sprint backlog items undergo implementation, and at the end of the sprint, with the help of this implementation, we will achieve our sprint goal. So this sprint backlog, which is helping us to achieve our sprint goal, is called as the scope of the sprint. As a team, we will be focusing on this scope so that we will be able to achieve our sprint goal. That's the reason when we know that this is our sprint goal, we pick up the work items that are aligned to the sprint goal from product backlog and then make it as a sprint backlog. For example, as a team, we are committing on a sprint goal called as user management and login implementation. So now it is all about what type of stories or what type of work items we pull from the product backlog which are related to user management and login. Then only we will be able to achieve this goal. We will not pick up something related to search functionality. We will not pick up something related to product catalog related functionality. Those things and all we will not be adding in our sprint backlog. Our focus for this sprint is to achieve user management and login related implementation. Let's pull the work items from the product backlog that are related to user management and login functionality. And another important thing what we will be checking whether DOR is met or not and whether the priority is high or not. Priority guidance will be given by the product owner and definition of ready is measured already. So we will be able to pick up these items. So according to the capacity available for the sprint, we will pull the items and prepare this sprint backlog. Why I am explaining this topic now is we now know for a team to focus on the work, the sprint backlog creation is very, very important. So when we spend the time on the sprint planning event, we as a team know that to achieve this goal, we need to focus on these work items. So we made up our mind in a way, okay, these all are the things we are going to work. Our complete focus is on working on these work items which we have prepared in the sprint backlog and achieve the sprint goal. Now, what will happen during the sprint execution if the sprint backlog is getting changed? It's going to be really a disturbing factor, right? Because my focus is going to be changed and it may impact. That's what is scope change. During sprint execution, if there is a change in the sprint backlog, that means it is called as scope change. Scope change can be adding the scope or removing the scope. Even if you remove something from the sprint backlog, that is also called a scope change. If we add something on the sprint backlog, that is also called a scope change. So, what is scope change? During sprint execution, if there is any addition or removal of scope in the sprint backlog items, it is called as scope change. So now we understood what is scope change, why it happens, why it occurs. We are doing sprint planning, we did earlier refinement, we know the priority, then also why the scope change happens. There are different reasons. We are going to see very, very important reasons. The first thing is the priority. Let's talk about priority here. So, whenever we work in a sprint, always the work items are pulled in the order of priority. High priority items will be picked up first and taken for execution. And the goal also derived or goal also prepared and aligned in a way that it is aligning to the high priority work. But still, during the sprint execution, what happens? There is a business call coming in and saying, from next sprint onwards, we need to start certain activity. For that, a spike is very important to understand the feasibility now. So let's drop the other priority work, which is the least in the overall list, and pick up this work item. So priority changes can create scope change. And the second thing in the priority itself is something like, from business, there is a sudden change. There was a meeting from the business side to the different stakeholders, and they realized that now we need to pick up this functionality. And after the sprint started, product owner is getting the information. Now suddenly during the sprint execution, product owner is informing there is a priority change and we need to take that scope, we need to take that in the scope, and there is a scope change happening. So the first reason is priority changes can create scope changes. Second thing, there is a work item that we have planned, and now this work item or the requirement itself becomes invalid. What is this situation? This situation is, we prepared user stories for a requirement and we refined those user stories, understood the dependencies, risk involved, planned properly, estimated it, and it is also part of the sprint goal for this sprint, and we have picked up in the sprint backlog. After all these situations and phases, now there is a call from business and product management team is requesting this requirement itself is no more valid, so we should not work on this user story. Now there is a change. So this requirement invalid situations also bring up scope changes. The next one, we created acceptance criteria to achieve certain points for a story, which are nothing but the use cases that we are going to develop for this functionality. And we prepared a very good list and we refined it and we estimated it. We estimated the story and we are good to start the work item as part of the sprint execution, and we are doing that. Now, suddenly, a product owner got few more use cases which got missed out, or we forgotten those things, or maybe some situation actually we missed that. Now that needs to be added in the story. The story is still valid. We are not going to drop the story. It is just the extension of scope that is already available. We are going to add few more things. But this is also scope change. Earlier I thought only few things I need to implement as a developer. Now the scope has been extended within the story. This is also a scope change. In the same case, a very opposite situation. We added so many use cases, but now we got into a situation that marketing team is saying, hey, please do not involve these use cases because this is no more valid. and we don't look for these options now, let's not invest the time, and this is not a right option to add it in our product, so this is going to be an invalid use case, let's not implement this. So now the user story is still valid, but certain use cases are invalid. So now there is a removal in the scope. This is also a scope change. The next one is ad hoc changes, ad hoc situations. What is this ad hoc situation? We planned all the things, we planned all the activities. Suddenly, there are changes coming from the production application. We have already deployed our application in the production, and some people, some clients, some customers are already using that. And suddenly, we are in a situation we need to immediately fix certain defects that have been created as part of a production issue. Now this issue takes priority, and this is, we cannot plan this because this is out of our control, because we don't know how many issues are going to come from the production environment. We have no idea whether issues will be coming, but suddenly some issues are coming from the production environment, and this is completely ad hoc. So now, as it is high priority in nature and it is really blocking the environment for people to use, we need to immediately take that in our sprint execution. This is also a scope change. So these are different ways a scope change can happen. In a nutshell, it is all about priority changes. It's all about the requirement becomes invalid, and addition of scope within the user story or within the functionality that we are developing. And fourth one is removal of certain functionalities in the requirement what we are developing, or removal of certain use cases we are developing. And the next one is ad hoc changes. So these all situations can bring into a scope change. So in this episode, we have discussed what is scope change and why scope change occurs. In the next episode, we are going to discuss about in scope change, what are the possible ways. I am going to give a very, very detailed example how the scope changes occur with a real-time example, and then get into a software-based example. I want to make the scope change with 3 to 4 episodes, just to ensure that we are completely aware of what is scope change, how to handle it, how to measure it. All those things we are going to discuss in our upcoming episodes. Thanks everyone for listening. Happy learning and stay tuned.